What happened when an undercover CEO returned to his music conservatory disguised as a maintenance worker and discovered his staff being silenced, students mistreated, and resources quietly disappearing? This isn't just a story about hidden corruption. It's about how one leader chose to get his hands dirty, expose the truth, and rebuild a broken system from within. Miles Whitaker stood outside the familiar arched entrance of Harmony Reach Conservatory, a building he hadn't set foot in for nearly 3 years. The morning air was sharp with the smell of pine mulch and distant bus fumes. Clad in a faded green utility jumpsuit and worn boots, he looked nothing like the man whose name was etched in gold on the founder's plaque near the main entrance. A mop handle poked out from the canvas duffel slung over his shoulder, and a borrowed name tag clipped to his chest read Clark. He tugged a ball cap low and adjusted his fake wire-rimmed glasses before stepping inside. The conservatory's old wood floors creaked beneath his boots, and the once bright student gallery near the lobby now looked dusty and neglected. He'd created this place to bring music and mentorship to kids who couldn't afford private instruction, but something had gone wrong. The stories from former staff, the spike in student withdrawals, and the troubling discrepancies in donation reports had all been too loud to ignore. So Miles had cleared his schedule, canceled his board meetings, and re-entered the place he'd once loved, not as its executive director, but as a fill-in maintenance assistant no one would suspect. A tired receptionist barely glanced up as she handed him a clipboard and pointed him toward the rear corridor. "You're covering for Eddie, right? Francis will tell you what to do." Francis Delacroix. That name again. Miles nodded and made his way down the hall, noting peeling paint, broken instrument lockers, and a distinct absence of student energy. This used to be a place that sang, literally and figuratively. Now it felt like it had been muted. As he passed the edge of the rehearsal wing, he paused, listening. A single violin squeaked hesitantly behind one of the closed doors. It was off-key, but trying. Just like this place. Just like him. Miles exhaled, straightened up, and moved toward the maintenance closet. He was here to listen, to observe, and most of all, to find out what had broken inside the heart of Harmony Reach. Because if no one else was going to fix it, he would, even if it meant scrubbing floors, blending in, and seeing things no executive ever sees. Especially when they're being told everything is just fine. Miles hadn't been in the building 20 minutes before the cracks started to show. After checking in with the receptionist, he was sent to the basement-level supply room to meet Francis Delacroix, the conservatory's operations coordinator. She emerged from the staff kitchen holding a clipboard like a weapon, heels clicking with authority on the tile floor. "You're the temp, Clark, right?" she asked flatly, without making eye contact. Her tone was brisk, her eyes sharp behind oversized glasses. She handed him a list of chores without a greeting. "Floors in the east hallway are scuffed, trash in the rehearsal wing is full, don't touch the percussion room unless you're told." Then she was gone. Miles barely had time to process the cold introduction before he was interrupted by a quiet voice behind him. "Don't mind her," said a woman in her mid-30s, ponytail tucked under a Harmony Reach baseball cap. "Francis treats everyone like a walking inconvenience." "I'm Naomi, senior program assistant. If you get lost, come find me." She offered a small, tired smile before disappearing into a classroom. Not long after, while sweeping near the front foyer, Miles witnessed a confrontation that stiffened his spine. A teenage violin instructor, barely older than the students herself, was being cornered near the attendant's desk. "Sophia," Francis snapped, holding up a timesheet, "you logged 3 extra hours last week. Are you inflating your reports now or just bad at math?" Sophia flushed red. "I stayed late on Wednesday for the recital. No one authorized that." "We're not paying for enthusiasm." Francis dropped the paper on the desk and walked off. Miles clenched the broom handle tighter. Moments later, a young boy, maybe 13, approached the lobby desk. His backpack was oversized, and he clutched a violin case nervously. "I'm here for Mr. Dunley's lesson. I lost my ID card, but I have my name on the schedule." The receptionist hesitated, looked toward Francis's office, and frowned. "If you don't have an ID, I can't let you in." "But I've been coming here all year," the boy pleaded. "It's just, I left it at home today. Please." The receptionist looked uncomfortable but firm. "Sorry, that's the rule." The boy's shoulders slumped. As he turned to leave, Miles stepped forward. "Hey, maybe we can double-check with the instructor?" The receptionist frowned. "New here? Don't overstep. That's how people get in trouble. Miles said nothing more, but inside his stomach turned. This wasn't a one-off oversight. It was a system built around suspicion, not trust. And it was only his first day. By the second day, Miles knew he wasn't just witnessing isolated incidents. He was stepping into a culture designed to silence and suppress. As he scrubbed scuff marks off the stage entry steps, he overheard Francis joking with Marcus Bell, the laid-back evening rehearsal coordinator, about trimming the fat from staff hours. If they can't survive here, they weren't serious to begin with, she said with a shrug, sipping coffee from a staff-only mug. Later that afternoon, Miles found himself in the cramped break room, fixing a leaky faucet while Naomi prepared a spreadsheet on an ancient laptop with a cracked hinge. She barely looked up when he asked, "Do people ever push back?" Her answer was immediate and grim. Push back against what? The schedule changes? The missing pay hours? The supply is vanishing? No one lasts long enough to challenge her, and the ones who do just disappear off the staff list. Quietly, Miles pressed gently. Has anyone reported it to the board? Naomi let out a breathy laugh. Frances is the board's golden child. They don't see this version of her. They see the grant-winning, budget-cutting, polished professional who's always under budget. Miles nodded slowly, committing every detail to memory. When he ventured into the instrument storage room later that day, he noticed cases labeled as donated stacked in a corner, gathering dust. A few were open, revealing missing bows and cracked bridges. Sophia passed by carefully returning a metronome and whispered, "Don't touch those. We're told they're out for special programs, but they haven't moved in months." Miles thanked her quietly. By evening, he saw a full picture forming: instructors walking on eggshells, instruments mismanaged, students underserved, and staff clinging to hope that someone, anyone, was paying attention. But the silence was louder than any piano scale or string tuning. Everyone knew the truth, but no one felt safe enough to say it, and Francis thrived in that fear. As Miles emptied the rehearsal room trash cans that night, he spotted a balled-up note someone had left behind. It read, "What's the point of teaching harmony in a place built on tension?" He folded it into his pocket, jaw tight. He had his answer. The people inside weren't the problem. The system protecting Francis was, and that system was about to be challenged. The breaking point came late Thursday afternoon, during an intermediate string rehearsal in Studio C. Miles was on his knees fixing a loose baseboard near the door when the atmosphere inside turned brittle. Francis stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching Sophia fumble with the overhead projector. The display kept flickering, and one of the speakers crackled. "This setup is unacceptable," Francis snapped. "Why wasn't this handled before class?" Sophia kept her voice even. "I submitted a repair request last week. It wasn't approved. Then you adapt. We're not funding your excuses." The students sat in awkward silence, eyes flicking between their instruments and the tension in the room. Miles clenched his jaw, holding back. After rehearsal, he found Sophia wiping down music stands in silence. "You okay?" he asked. She gave a tight nod. "I'm fine, just tired." After a pause, she added, "Francis docked my stipend last month for leaving 5 minutes early one day, even though my student's lesson ended early." Miles blinked. "Is that even allowed?" She shrugged. "She says the system's flexible for her." Her voice cracked and she looked away. "I'm trying to stay. My mom's out of work. My brother's in school. I thought this job could help us." Miles said nothing at first, but the image of her being scolded in front of children, combined with her quiet desperation, settled like lead in his chest. Later that evening, while gathering trash from the loading dock, Miles struck up a conversation with Marcus. "You've been here a while, right?" he asked. Marcus nodded, sipping soda from a paper cup. 6 years, give or take. Why? "Ever notice things going missing?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Missing like equipment?" "Yeah, all the time, but it's subtle. Frances is slick. She makes it look like donations were rerouted or old stock was discarded." He chuckled bitterly. "And if something big goes wrong, she blames a student volunteer or one of the part-timers. A few months ago, she accused a kid of stealing violin strings that were never even logged in." Miles's heart thudded. "What happened to them?" "Fired, quietly, no questions asked." That night, Miles couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the scoldings, the exhaustion in Naomi's eyes. Sophia's near tears, Marcus's apathy, and the disappearing resources. This wasn't just a dysfunctional workplace. It was a rigged ecosystem designed to wear people down until they stopped resisting. And that kind of system didn't break on its own. It had to be dismantled, piece by dishonest piece. Friday arrived with a strange air of artificial polish. For the first time all week, the conservatory's floors were waxed, the hallway lights replaced, and a small welcome sign placed at the entrance. Francis was orchestrating the chaos like a seasoned conductor, barking orders one moment, offering sugary compliments the next. "We need perfect posture in the percussion wing," she told Marcus. "And Naomi, get rid of that folding table, it's an eyesore." Miles, still in his Clark disguise, watched her transform the space with cosmetic urgency. The reason for the performance? A mid-year board visit. Richard Halston, the conservatory's newest board liaison, was scheduled to tour the facility and attend that evening's youth recital. By noon, Frances was all smiles, ushering Richard from room to room, her voice laced with strategic charm. "Thanks to our new scheduling system," she explained, "we've streamlined instructor hours and improved budget efficiency." Richard nodded along, impressed. "Enrollment dipped slightly," she added. "But that's to be expected. We've focused on quality over quantity this quarter." Miles trailed behind them under the guise of checking mop water, taking mental notes of every lie. Frances introduced Richard to students by name, even those she routinely ignored. She claimed credit for grant applications Naomi had written. When asked about staff turnover, she simply said, "We've made space for stronger hires." That evening, families filed into the recital hall. The string ensemble opened with Bach, the percussion group followed with an energetic beat, and finally a solo violin performance by one of the younger students, Jamal Ross. The boy Miles had seen turned away days before. But just as Jamal began, a string snapped mid-measure. The violin faltered. Frances, standing in the wings, rolled her eyes. "Unacceptable," she hissed to Naomi. "This is why I said those instruments needed to be locked up." Naomi turned pale. Sophia, seated nearby, jumped to assist Jamal, but Frances intervened. "Don't coddle, we're not running a nursery." Jamal's eyes watered, but he took a deep breath and finished the piece as best he could. The applause was hesitant, uneven. Miles stood in the back, arms crossed. He had seen enough. The recital had exposed what the gloss couldn't hide: poor equipment care, a culture of blame, and an environment that shamed rather than supported. As families began filing out, he stepped outside to make a quiet phone call. "Get the documentation ready," he told his assistant. "I'm coming in on Monday. As for myself..." Monday morning dawned clear and cold, but inside Harmony Reach, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation. Miles arrived, not as Clark the maintenance man, but as Miles Whitaker, the founder, executive director, and silent observer of the past week. Gone was the utility jumpsuit, replaced with a navy button-down and a staff ID clipped plainly to his chest. At 9:15 a.m. he requested all staff report to the recital hall for an impromptu meeting. Whispers swirled as employees gathered, some still sipping their morning coffee, others glancing anxiously at Frances, who stood near the front, arms crossed. Naomi looked confused. Sophia visibly stiffened. Marcus gave a short nod, as if he'd suspected all along. Miles took center stage, cleared his throat, and began. "My name is Miles Whitaker. I've been with you these past 7 days, but not in the way you thought. I've been observing, listening, and learning, not through reports or emails, but through your eyes, your work, your silence, and your courage." The room fell utterly still. Frances stared at him, frozen, her face drained of color. He continued, voice calm but unwavering. "I saw a student humiliated at the front desk for forgetting an ID. I saw an instructor publicly blamed for equipment failures she didn't cause. I saw donation inventory mislogged, stipend hours shaved, and a culture of intimidation disguised as order." Frances interjected, her voice tight and incredulous. "This is a misunderstanding. You weren't authorized." "I authorized myself," Miles interrupted coolly, "because I built this place. And what it's become under your management is unacceptable." He turned to the group. "What I saw last week was not a series of small mistakes. It was a system protected by fear and maintained by manipulation." He gestured to Naomi. "Your reports were rewritten." He nodded at Marcus. "Your warnings were ignored." Then finally he looked at Frances. "Your position here ends today." A gasp rippled through the room. Francis stammered. You don't have the authority to—" "I have every authority. And I'm exercising it. You've breached the trust of this institution, misused its resources, and created an environment of harm." As he spoke, his assistant entered quietly from the side door with a security officer and a clipboard. "You'll be escorted to collect your things. A formal investigation will follow." Frances looked around the room for support and found none. Not even Marcus met her eyes. Her defiance crumbled into disbelief. She walked out, silent. Miles turned back to the team. "What happens next won't be easy, but it will be honest, and we'll rebuild this place together." The silence that followed was no longer fear, it was relief. The conservatory remained closed for 2 days following Francis's departure, not for damage control, but for healing and reorientation. Miles made it clear from the outset, no one would lose pay during the pause. Instead, it would be used to reset the culture and clear the air. That first morning, Miles met with each staff member individually. He promoted Naomi Ellis to Director of Programs, recognizing not just her loyalty but her quiet leadership that had sustained the place behind the scenes. Marcus Bell, once viewed as indifferent, was tapped to assist with auditing the equipment and facility logs, his long tenure proving valuable in identifying what had gone missing and where corners had been cut. One of the most unexpected promotions was for Andre Ruiz, a percussion instructor known for his patience and consistent presence. With calm professionalism and no drama attached to his name, he was chosen to lead as the new rehearsal coordinator. Staff were stunned, but in a good way. The promotions weren't about favoritism or politics anymore. They were about trust and integrity. Miles gathered everyone in the recital hall on the second afternoon. There were no scripts or projections, just open conversation. "We've put in new policies," he announced. "Mandatory breaks, equipment reporting channels, and a direct line from every staff member to leadership. No middle filter. And starting today, retaliation is a fireable offense." That last part drew murmurs of relief from the room. Miles handed out printed packets detailing the zero retaliation clause, digital scheduling protocols, and guidelines for conflict resolution. "These are not suggestions," he said. "These are the new standards." For the first time in years, people were speaking up. Naomi recommended a mentorship system for younger instructors, like Sophia. Marcus flagged a supply vendor he suspected had been overcharging the facility under Francis's watch. Even quiet Andre suggested a rotating staff council to review concerns and relay ideas monthly. Miles listened to all of it, writing notes as he nodded. This was more than just a personnel change. It was a reawakening. The people who had once worked with their heads down were now lifting them up, asking questions, and, most importantly, beginning to believe that their voices mattered again. For Miles, it wasn't about reclaiming control. It was about redistributing it, so no one person could break what so many had built ever again. When Harmony Reach reopened, it didn't resume with the usual bustle of rehearsals and lesson schedules. Instead, it began with conversation. The doors remained locked to the public that morning, as staff gathered in the main lobby, where folding tables had been set up with printed schedules, revised protocols, and fresh name tags. Miles stood among them, not above them, helping hand out new materials and answering questions with patient clarity. Naomi, now in her new role, led the walkthrough of the updated reporting process, while Marcus guided the team through an audit checklist for all instruments and supplies. As each section was reviewed, a quiet energy replaced the tension that had once lingered in every corner. Sophia, no longer hesitant, had been paired with a mentor from a neighboring art center and given a modest raise. Her confidence had shifted. She asked questions in meetings, shared ideas for student engagement, and even stayed after to help Andre recalibrate percussion equipment. Jamal, the young violin student once denied entry, now had a scholarship slot in the weekend masterclass and had been gifted a refurbished violin. Miles had personally ensured that his instrument came with a case, strings, and a handwritten note. "You're welcome here." Feedback boxes were installed outside every classroom, anonymous but accessible. The suggestion wall, once a forgotten corkboard near the back office, had been relocated to the main hallway, now titled Voices That Matter. Colorful sticky notes began to appear within hours, requests for practice mics, wellness breaks between lessons, even a request for a tea kettle in the break room. Miles read each one and placed check marks beside those already in progress. The message was clear: visibility mattered. Staff meetings shifted tone entirely. No longer dominated by Francis's clipped criticisms, they became collaborative. Unje, normally soft-spoken, led his first planning session with clarity and purpose. Even Mila, the new assistant who had almost quit after her first week, contributed confidently to a discussion on student onboarding improvements. Miles knew they weren't done. The transformation wasn't complete, but it was happening, not just on paper, but in tone, posture, and trust. Harmony Reach had begun humming again, not just with music, but with the sound of people daring to care out loud. 3 weeks after the upheaval, Harmony Reach Conservatory hosted its first open house under new leadership, a modest event, but one that carried the weight of transformation. The recital hall, once a place of quiet dread, now buzzed with energy. Strings were tuned, drums tested, and laughter spilled from the instrument lockers where tension used to reside. Families wandered through the practice wings, guided by Naomi, who explained the new mentorship system and showcased the feedback boards lined with colorful responses. Marcus managed sound for the main stage, checking microphones with a diligence that surprised even him. Andre led a student percussion group in the courtyard, tapping out rhythms that drew a small crowd of curious visitors and beaming parents. Sophia stood backstage beside Jamal, offering encouragement before his solo. He stepped out holding the violin gifted to him weeks earlier, now personalized with a tiny blue ribbon on the case handle. As his bow met the strings, a hush fell over the room. His music wasn't flawless, but it was full of spirit, and everyone could feel it. Miles stood at the back of the recital hall, hands folded, watching. He didn't need to give a speech. The performance spoke for itself. He wasn't there as a figurehead, but as a witness to the power of what can happen when people are finally seen, heard, and supported. After the applause, Jamal exited the stage, his eyes shining, and Sophia clapped for him louder than anyone. Mila helped pass out refreshments, chatting with guests like she'd always belonged. The suggestion wall had grown so full it required a second board. Miles glanced over and smiled at one anonymous message in bold marker. "Thank you for giving us back the heart of this place." As the sun set, casting golden light through the front windows, Miles stepped outside for air. The building glowed from within, not just from light fixtures or fresh paint, but from a renewed spirit. He had come in hoping to expose the cracks. What he had uncovered was something more powerful, a resilient team waiting for permission to care again. The legacy he once feared he'd lost had not only been reclaimed, it had evolved. Harmony Reach was no longer just his vision, it was theirs, and together, they had brought it back to life. The story of Harmony Reach Conservatory teaches a powerful lesson about leadership, accountability, and the quiet strength of community. At its core, it reminds us that no system, no matter how noble its mission, can thrive if built on fear, favoritism, and silence. True leadership isn't about titles or distance. It's about presence, listening, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Miles Whitaker's decision to step into the shadows of his own organization revealed the reality that policies and procedures are meaningless without trust, empathy, and integrity. The story also highlights how everyday people like Naomi, Sophia, and Jamal can endure so much in silence, hoping for change. But when someone finally listens, believes in them, and acts with conviction, transformation becomes possible. Empowerment isn't granted from above, it's cultivated through shared respect and consistent fairness. In rebuilding Harmony Reach, Miles didn't just fix what was broken, he built something better by placing value on people, not just productivity. The lesson is clear: healing begins when we replace fear with honesty and power with purpose. And sometimes, the best way to lead is to walk quietly among those you serve, to truly see what they see, and to act when no one else will.